tell me, Dmytro, what is the situation on the ground right now? How are people feeling? It is usually like a very celebratory type of day. We have our own Canada Day, which is the same. So what's the mood of people in Kyiv and across the country?
Well, it is definitely a very special Independence Day in our history. On the one hand, the confidence in independence and the strength of Ukraine among the people of our country is unprecedented. The recent poll is record high, like 97% of people, of Ukrainians, fully endorse independence of Ukraine, which is, of course, the fact that speaks for itself. People celebrate, but this is, I would call, a very concentrated inner celebration, because people understand the challenges and the threats that exist, including the potential missile attacks, which may happen today, and actually some of them have already occurred across the country. So it's a mixture of celebration and a very strong sense of responsibility for the country. Mm-hmm. This is what you can feel. There are not too many people on the streets, which, well, actually there are very few people on the streets for security reasons. Usually Independence Day is the time when streets are crowded. But I think we, for obvious reasons, we grew up as citizens, as people who learn how to appreciate the freedom and independence of their country. And this is probably the biggest lesson of this day. Nothing is given for granted. You have to be able to defend your freedom and your independence at any given moment. But the struggle does not abolish this celebratory mood and the understanding that there is something that you have, that is an inherited part of you.
Yeah, well, there's certainly, Ukrainians are certainly a source of inspiration, courage for Canadians and for all around the world. So thank you. And we will be celebrating humbly with you, commemorating. A bit later, I'll be with the mayor of Toronto, and we'll be and with your ambassador, your fantastic ambassador to Canada, Yulia, and we will be doing a flag raising ceremony in Toronto. Now, let me ask you about concretely. You and I, have been talking to each other a lot over the past 6 months. For many times, you asked for more weapons. You also asked for more training for Ukrainian soldiers to be ready to use the new weapons sent by the West. We came up with the resumption of Operation Unifier, which was so key to the training Ukrainian forces. We will be training Ukrainians out of the UK. What's the impact of it? Can you talk to Canadians about how this makes a real difference in your country?
Well, to assess today's impact, we have to go back to the 2014, when the first effort to train Ukrainian army started. Mm-hmm. And Canada was among the first nations to offer its help, and in the form of the Operation Unifier. So when the 24th of February came, part of our army was already trained by advanced instructors, and including from Canada. And it was not about, the most important thing is that this training was not even as much about the tactical skills of improving tactical skills of soldiers and officers, but about changing the very philosophy of how the army should be structured, how it should operate, And all of these skills, they prove to be very helpful because you cannot win Russia if you fight like Russia. Russian strategy is to use people as cannon fodder, is to ensure overwhelming domination on the battlefield in ammunition, in artillery fire, and in rockets. But what we've been learning since 2014 was how to fight a smart war. And of course, in that context, this is exactly what we needed. We cannot beat Russia using the same tactics as Russia. And more importantly, we're not willing to do so because we have a completely different set of values. For us, human life matters. And be it a soldier or a civilian. It was extremely important to launch these operations, these training missions, to help our soldiers to prepare for this different type of resistance. Now, I believe it will not be an exaggeration to say that foreign armies can learn and should learn from Ukrainian army on many accounts. But it's still important that we remain connected. You continue your operations, all these supporting missions continue because they help to learn and to immediately apply this knowledge on the battlefield.
Well, this is one of the best explanations that I've heard. Regarding why we should continue Operation Unifier and the impacts of the 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers that we've been able to train since 2014. Because sometimes, Dmytro, we talk about Ukrainians being ready for new types of weapons, but the fact of being fundamentally fighting differently from Russia for also value-based reasons is the first time I hear it. So thank you for sharing that, because I think this is clearly something that I'll be reusing as I explain it also to Canadians. On another issue we've worked a lot on, which is the food security issue. So we know that 40% of Ukraine's economy is linked to grains and agriculture and grains export. It is fundamental for Ukraine to be able to continue these exports to sustain an economy. And of course, it is fundamental to export these grains because so many countries depend on it. We know that around 50 million lives are at stake if the grain is not exported from Ukraine to the Middle East and Africa. Now, there's been a lot of changes also to how you're exporting. Yes, there's been some work on Odessa with the UN, but also there's been a lot of work that we've done together to store grains with mobile grain silos, to make sure that we have food inspectors also, and that we export grains bit by bit more through Romania and Europe. So I would like to hear from you. What are you seeing on the ground, and what are our farmers in Ukraine doing in light of what's going on right now?
Well, the most important thing is that we are exporting. Mm-hmm. This is the key achievement. It's not an easy ride, and there are many difficulties in this process. The most challenging of which, of course, is it's not even the lack of trust, but it's the absence, the zero trust in Russia. Mm-hmm. However, with the support of the United Nations and Turkey, we are trying to keep Russia on board of this initiative to allow exports of agricultural products, of Ukrainian agricultural products to the global market. Mm-hmm. If Russia does not betray this initiative, if it doesn't stab it in the back, exports will continue.
And so on the question of clearly imports, I know that we're working definitely to make sure that there are better imports, particularly through Poland. But we know very well that your economy is suffering, and we've provided help through the IMF, but we need to do more, and then we're in conversation to do more. I know that President Zelensky reached out to Prime Minister Trudeau to do that. And you and I, will continue after this conversation many times to find ways to help Ukraine, particularly with your finances. Now, talk to me about the war fatigue, because it is a real thing. I was giving interviews this morning at the CBC and CTV, and saying to the hosts that, in their newscasts, Ukraine is not necessarily the first news of the newscast. And we had to bring and shed light to what was going on to make sure that people were still following and still supporting. How do you see it coming from the country itself that is affected by war?
Well, I cannot impose interest in Ukraine on other nations, right? But I think it would really help if governments who share the same values with us, they could communicate with their societies and better explain to them that this is not just an aggression of Putin against Ukraine. This is an aggression of Putin against the West, against everyone who lives in a decent life in a democracy, be it in Europe or in North America or in Asia or in Africa or in South America. The only difference is that while Putin attacks Ukraine with missiles and tanks, and we lose our lives in this war, Putin simultaneously attacks every household in Europe, in Canada, in other regions and countries of the world with increasing energy prices, inflation, his propaganda. And you are paying with the quality of your life. This is the difference. We pay with our lives, you pay with the quality of your life for Putin's aggression against all of us. And Putin will, for Putin, all of us, be it in Ukraine or in Canada, we are his enemies because we stand for different values. We all prove that democracy is the best way to ensure decent life, to give decent life to people, and to ensure freedoms. He hates all of these things. So if people in Canada understand that we are in the same boat, all of us, I guess their interest in the factual or actual war in Ukraine will grow. Will grow. I'm sorry, I'm a bit tired, but you got my point.
I got your point, and it's important day. One last point. I think what we should definitely continue to work together is on accountability. I remember on the day of the invasion, you were in New York, and I've been saying this story to our colleagues, foreign ministers, but I was always impressed and I must say moved, because on the day of the invasion, you were in New York at the UN, and rather than fleeing the country, you decided to go back directly to Kyiv, which was being bombarded through Turkey, and just really going back to that fire. And in the days that followed, very quickly, we worked on many things together, but particularly the question of accountability. And we were, along with Ukraine and Lithuania, the three first countries to seize the ICC and the ICJ regarding the question of the Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. So I just wanted to let you know that Canada is steadfast in its support also to seek accountability. You and I have talked about many issues, but the question of forced adoption, abduction of children is something that today I decided to highlight to the Canadian public even more, because we sanction also Maria Yova-Belova, who's the children's rights commissioner in Russia, and who is the architect behind the thousands of abduction of children in Mariupol and Eastern Ukraine. So, and she needs to be held accountable, and all the perpetrators of these diabolic crimes need to be held accountable before international forums. But I just wanted to let you know that you can always count on me, on my government, and on Canada to make sure that we continue to, yes, put pressure, but also seek accountability. And I think we're the best, best country to do that with Ukraine, because we have been at the core of the creation of these institutions internationally.
Your commitment is much appreciated. I hope that together we will be also able to fill a gap that exists in current international law, which is bringing President Putin and his immediate entourage to account for the crime of aggression. Mm-hmm. Because the current legal argument, or the legal framework, is that you can prosecute Putin, you can prosecute Russian officials in the International Criminal Court for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of genocide. But it is impossible to try them for the crime of aggression, which is the mother of all crimes that follow the aggression in this particular case. And we need to fill that gap. We cannot allow them to escape responsibility for that. The idea that Ukraine put on the table is the setting up of a special ad hoc tribunal. We're still in discussions with many governments, including yours, on how to proceed with this idea. But I want to take this opportunity to emphasize that we shouldn't turn a blind eye on the issue of the crime of aggression simply because the ICC, which enjoys conventional and almost universal support, cannot try perpetrators of this crime within its walls. But accountability is essential. This is really, this war will continue until the last perpetrator of the crimes committed in the course of this war against Ukrainian population will be brought to justice.
Well, I had a good conversation with Erwin Cutler, who is one of the strongest human rights defenders in the world. He is linked to the Raoul Wallenberg Human Rights Center in Montreal, former Minister of Justice of ours. And we talked about the question of the crime of aggression. So we'll get back to you on this, because I think we definitely need to work more on this issue. But, this is not our last conversation. And this is a sobering, but at the same time should be a festive moment for you. So I'll let you go. I just wanted to, wish you again happy Independence Day. Happy Independence Day also to all Canadian Ukrainians, biggest diaspora outside Russia in Canada. And thank you for this, my friend. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you for your congratulations, and thank you for standing by us and for being a good friend.